I actually think sacrifice plays a huge part in high performance, as probably just as much as discipline. I think they kind of come hand in hand, and certainly for real estate,
having that future identity is so key. And I think that translates to anyone in any walk of life, because with discipline, right? Yeah. And it's having the discipline to recognize what is going to benefit me and what is not going to benefit me.
Welcome back to Taking Care of Business. I have been really looking forward to this episode. This week, I am joined by Chris Bowman, who is the founder of Elite Sports Performance. Hello, mate.
How you doing?
How are you?
Finally get to come to the Mecca.
We've been talking a long time, me and Chris, about trying to get him on the show. We've worked with each other in the past. You've done some bits and pieces for me, a PT perspective, and also you've done some stuff with us quite recently, talking to our managers about our topic today, which is high performance.
Yeah, correct. Yeah.
So I finally got you here, mate. So thank you very much for your time. I appreciate it, even though you're a little bit late.
Pleasure. Sorry about that.
Right, so the topic of today's conversation, although we are a real estate and investing podcast, we're actually here to talk about high performance. And I actually think this links in really well with work, with investing, with really getting the absolute most out of yourself. So I guess before we even talk about high performance in general, tell us a little bit about yourself, mate, your company, and really how this links into what we're talking about today.
Yeah, so moved to Dubai actually 5 years ago today to set the company up, initially as myself and then expanded the team. Previously I was physio at Leeds United. I've been worked in football, professional football in England for 10 years. And then since being here, we've now, serviced over 270 athletes from various different sports, be that for rehab, training, in season and off season. So we performance manage athletes who play in the leagues here. So yeah, it's been a journey, but we're in a good place now.
It's been incredible. So obviously, I have Chris on various different socials and following what he does, and we chat every now and then about football results and stuff. And to say you worked not obviously with the highest level is an understatement. You said you worked with Leeds United in your previous job. Over here, you're working with not just local football talent, but also international, maybe some famous players you might have heard of.
Yeah. So we've had some, household names: Declan Rice, Kieran Trippier, Robert Lewandowski. We've worked with in the past. Johnny Sexton from the rugby side of things, which is a great one for me personally to work with people from other sports as well. And going on to the topic of what we'll talk about today, there's some common themes within each of those individuals that has got them and keeps them where they are.
Well, it's interesting because I'm on a little journey myself at the moment, a fitness journey, and I think throughout my whole, let's say, 20s and even early 30s, I was active. I played football, and I went to gym. Nowhere near the level now. And I think as I've approached my mid-30s, I'm thinking, oh my God, I've got 2 daughters. Like, the importance of being healthy here and here is become even more apparent. And now I'm on this little journey of with discipline and regular exercise. It's made me realise how much impact that can have on your life, your work life, your home life, your sleep. And a lot of these things, you see these high performance podcasts, sometimes you might just wash it off and think, is that just someone feeling me a bit of spiel, and it's a bit of, chest thumping and, you need to do more sort of things. But it's crazy the impact, the physical impact, and it can have on you in all parts of your life. So a little bit about what I'm doing in a minute. So I'm going on this fitness journey where I'm having to work a certain number of days a week. I'm having to sleep a certain number of hours, and I'm having to eat a certain amount of things. And I've seen benefits already to my sleep, my moods, my productivity in work. But when I relate that back to professionals, it fascinate me, because I always think and look around and being a bit of a people watching a voyeur, I always think, what's different to you to someone else that was probably as good as that person as their younger age group, or different categories, whatever it might be? What's the difference between someone that's here and someone that's just as good but they never made it? And maybe you can give some examples of something you've worked with.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, to be honest, the straight away thing that comes to mind is just consistency. I define high performance as the basics done well consistently. So it's not the basics done well one day and then the next day they go out the window. It's every single day, just get the basics right. We often get asked that by, maybe some young footballers here, what's the difference between a guy from the Premier League or me, etc. And they just make sure that the basics are done, exemplary every single.
Do you think a good example is Gary Neville?
Gary Neville's a great example.
Because you look at him as a footballer, if anyone's watching football, Gary Neville wasn't technically, to the normal, someone who perhaps doesn't know football as well as the professional footballers, wasn't the most sexiest of footballers, but my God, what a career he has in terms of longevity and what he won. And when I listen to him, he strikes me as someone that was so regimented. He was unbelievable, and didn't really have a day off by the sounds of it. And same with Jamie Carragher, players like that. They were very, very I guess followed the process every day.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, obviously there's another theory of there's a chap who spoke on the High Performance podcast. Actually, he's a British mountaineer who's climbed Everest more times than anyone else, and his definition of high performance is being at 70 to 80% of your maximum on a daily basis, but having another gear you can go to when required. So I find that really interesting because, a large part of my upbringing would have always been, 100% full throttle all times, but he's kind of saying that only ever leads to burnout. And for him on the mountain, if he burns out on the mountain, he's dead. There's no room for error. Whereas actually what he needs is in those moments of crisis to be able to kick on and go again to another level. And I think that's what you see, with these elite performers, your Rafa Nadal's, or even, Andy Murray's a great example of what he's done in his career. Like maybe as a tennis player, he wasn't as talented as a Federer, but he can beat him because he can dig it out.
Yeah.
And there's so many examples, throughout the sporting world really of that.
So in my life, when I played football at a very, very low level, even related to real estate, I have come across some unbelievably fantastic players, unbelievably fantastic real estate agents, but extremely lazy, don't follow the basics, are up and down, yo-yoing. To some of these players that have made professional football and are high performers, is it fair to say not all of them are the best footballers? But they've done the basics?
I would say so. I mean, how many stories have you heard throughout, our interest in the sport of these players who were fantastically talented but never quite reached the pinnacle? I'll use Paul Gascoigne as an example. Great player, unbelievable.
Yeah.
Never got anywhere near winning a Ballon d'Or. Yeah. Really. And why was that? Well, look at the lifestyle factors behind it. When he's obviously older now, maybe he sits there with a few regrets. Yeah. Because he didn't win the World Cup with England and these things, or he didn't win the Premier League title. Yeah. And I think that's the difference between your Ronaldos, your Messis, your Johnny Sextons of the world. Actually where it stems from, and I spoke about this during the lecture series we did with you guys, but it actually stems from your identity and kind of that driving a thought process. Often we take habits and actions based on our feelings and how we feel in certain moments, but feelings always change, right? Like one day you might wake up tomorrow and feel like exercising, but you might wake up tomorrow and not feel like it. But having that identity you mentioned about in your journey, a conscious thought now about your kids and all that sort of stuff, so that you want to be a healthy dad. For your kids, so that's your identity. So you'll take actions now that are based on that rather than based on Carl feeling like exercising in the morning.
I've got an interesting thing for you. So you talk about Paul Gascoigne. Do you think high performance is connected to environment?
Yes.
So where that person is, or the surroundings, or the people they're around, in terms of how that impacts their performance or their want to perform to a higher level?
Yeah. 100%. I mean, the Pillars of Performance lecture that I did actually breaks this down, and I had to reverse engineer myself for the Middle East Fitness Conference what makes people perform, and I'd never consciously thought of it. And the psychology underpins everything, and within that you've got the subcategory then of environment, the people you hang around with. If you're a footballer, do you have the chef that comes to your house? Yeah. Do you have the gym inside your house?
or the recovery, how much you spend. So, so one of the things I read a little while ago was, I'm sure it might be Ronaldo or someone, one of the players, so there's a player that plays at Coventry called Victor Gyökeres, probably the best player in the Championship, and one of the players said that after he finishes training, he probably spends 5-6 hours on recovery every single day, whether it's massages, whether it's chambers or whatever it might be, to ensure that the next day is 100% best. He's probably spending more time recovering, preparing for the next day he does training.
But LeBron James spends $1.5 million on his body per year.
Wow. And to know, when you put it in
he's 38, and he's just won a game for the Lakers yesterday against the Warriors.
But when you put it in perspective, it's not a lot of money when it's your body, it's your health, it's your life, and for all we know, it's one. You only get one. So, okay, so some of the points I've got here today with my lovely head of comms, Alini's put together, and some of the words I've never even heard before, by the way. So one of the words she talked about was dopamine. I had to research for what the hell is dopamine. What is dopamine for anyone listening to the podcast? So we've got a series of chemicals, right, that affect our everyday actions. So dopamine is a big one at the moment, especially in the world of mental health and stuff that is coming more and more to the fore. Now, dopamine is essential for human survival. So they did a study that's cited in a book called Atomic Habits by James Clear. And basically, on this study in rats, they removed dopamine from the rats completely, and they lost the will to live. They literally die. So dopamine is responsible for all your drivers. It's responsible for your drive to breathe. It's feeling based, right? Like your emotional feeling, or
it creates feelings, but it's very much around the fight flight response kind of thing that is innate in us. There's another chemical called serotonin, which is secreted when you exercise, that sort of thing. And then you've got cortisol, which is secreted when you, let's say, like stroke a dog or a bit of sunlight, etc., etc. So all these things impact the way we feel, impact our kind of ability to repeat tasks, repeat actions. Now, dopamine is the thing that is very short-term high, massive crash afterwards.
Okay.
Think about a heavy night out. You're on cloud 9, right? And the next morning, how do you feel?
Or 3 days afterwards in my case.
Exactly. And now that's a dopamine secretion. Exactly the same thing that is secreted actually when you do a skydive or when you go skiing. So you get these huge, monumental highs, but also crashes.
A bit like Christmas Day as well. The high, and then afterwards it's all over with.
Exactly. Whereas serotonin response is, when you've exercised, there's a prolonged feeling that you get for a longer period of time. When you hug someone, even that's secreted, and then cortisol, like I mentioned there, sunlight and those things. So going it back into kind of what dopamine is, it's essential and it should be utilized, but it's very important to regulate your dopamine.
So how do you control that? Because for anyone watching, when I read it, I thought, like, how do I control these levels, and how can I channel it to make sure it benefits me?
So then it comes down to the habits, and it comes down to ultimately understanding what those things are first and foremost. I'm very passionate that actually people should be educated on this to understand their brains. So for example, rather than going out and having a big night out on the beers, going out and doing an intense exercise class will still give you the same level of kind of buzz, but you won't get a massive crash afterwards. And then you can also look at, the second day, how do you feel? What's your productivity like? Obviously the effects on your general health, etc., etc. So coming back into kind of, one of the phrases we were talking about before the podcast was discipline, right? And it's having the discipline to recognize what is going to benefit me and what is not going to benefit me. But again, I've got to draw that back to kind of identity. For me, I want me and my company to grow exponentially. So, when it comes down to a midweek potential night out, for example, well, there is I don't see any benefit in that to me, because it's going to reduce my productivity the next day. I love my exercise. It's probably going to, detriment my ability to do that. So it doesn't even enter my thought process. It's a complete non-negotiable, and that has taken a while to obviously get to that level, and I'm thankful I'm empowered with the knowledge, but that's the sort of thing now we're trying to kind of educate people with.
Okay, so you love exercise, and so you love your exercise, and the pace you go, you're unbelievable, by the way. But let's say someone is not in that frame of mind at the moment in terms of exercise, and they don't particularly love what exercise. How does someone get more out of that? Because I'm in this mode at the moment where I enjoy exercise, but I'm in this weird box where I have to every day do something. If I don't do it, it irritates me. I have to tick it off. So that exercise in my box set today, where if I don't do it, I'll make sure I find time to do it today, and I have to do it.
Yeah.
But if someone's not in that space and they listen to this podcast and think, okay, I want to get more out of myself in general, where do they start? What do they do? Is it just a case of just doing it, or?
There's a little bit of that, but exercise isn't everyone's cup of tea. But going for a walk and having a coffee with a friend is as good as anything, right? You get in a human connection. As humans, we are designed to connect with each other.
Yeah.
And you will get this hormonal release. You will get that from just doing that.
Yeah.
So if you think about maybe why we do go out and watch the footy and all that, well, it's a social occasion.
Yeah.
Everything we do really is generated around social interaction. But there's a lot of other ways to do that than things that are potentially negative and harmful to our bodies, but also our brains, really, more than anything.
When people with this job, and I don't think it's just sort of thinking in general real estate, typically you have highs and lows. I call it champagne or razor blades. So there's one end of the spectrum. You can do really well in this job, and some people may not earn many money. When people don't do well, they typically turn to drink or turn to habits that are perhaps not too good for you. Why do you think people do that?
Dopamine.
Really?
So when they get a big, using your example here of the real estate world, a big sale, big commission, gives a huge spike of dopamine,
right,
straight away. The same effect as jumping out of an airplane, as a big night out, as taking drugs. It's the same.
Yeah.
It's the same thing. Within the study, encourage anyone to read the book. It's unbelievable, Atomic Habits. But within the study, they had the rats, obviously, with the dopamine. They had some rats that rats love to eat, right? They're the biggest creature on the planet that craves that. So they had sugar in front of the rats, and one group of rats could access the sugar, and they measured the brain activity, and the dopamine spike. Another group of rats could see the sugar, but couldn't access it. Okay? Amazing. The two sets of rats secreted the same amount of dopamine in their brain.
Really?
So you only need to see it. You don't need to, they then talk about addiction actually within the book. You only need to see the thing that you want, alcohol or money or whatever it is, to get the dopamine secretion in your brain. You don't need to use it.
Wow. Mind is blown.
Yeah.
One of the most amazing things I've seen in quite a while, I'm honest with you, is something you've done with one of my good friends, Rob Kempton.
Yeah.
So tell us a bit about Rob Kempton and where he was when he come to see you and beginning of November.
Yeah, I mean, so obviously we've known Rob a long time, right? And Rob's always said to me, Chrissy, I want to get back on it. I want to get my body right, etc. Loves his football, doesn't he? And he's not been playing for a long time. And then he came to me on the 4th of January, it was, just after Christmas.
Yeah.
And he'd been at the MMA with you guys.
And we set him a challenge.
You set him a challenge of getting to a light heavyweight boxing weight.
So approximately 30 kilograms, we said to him. Yeah. Can you lose 30 kilograms? Was it 100 days or something?
He had 80 days, from when I saw him, but he was probably about 20 days from when you guys had that discussion, So he came to me January the 4th, and obviously I'd heard it before, and sat down and we had a discussion, and I said, listen, before we embark on this, there's a few sets of rules, really, like, if we're going to do it. And yeah, I mean, it just shows that when you buy into a process, and to be honest, going back to kind of wise or why he stuck to the process. A large part of it was to prove a lot of people wrong, to be honest with you, like that kind of innate male pride. But then as he started to see the results, actually, you know, obviously he's got young kids as well and managed to play football again, etc., which, you know, his kids will never have seen him play football ever, which is a travesty. This guy loves football.
Yeah, and good at it as well.
Yeah, very good at it, and that's more important than any weight or whatever. And also, like I said to him, I said, you know, you've added 5-10 years on your life there.
So he was 120 kilos, about at 118 and a half, something like that.
Yeah.
You got him down to
95.8, yeah.
In 80 days is like, wow. I mean, unbelievable. So what sort of things, because I went running with him and you to kind of give him support. And I seen he went through some really dark moments to try and achieve this. Like, how did you keep him on track and steer him to ensure that he knew he was on the right track and he was going the right way?
A couple of the key pillars, to be honest. Obviously, diet is one of them. You know, reducing his calories. You know, educating him that you don't need that loaf of bread at 10 o'clock at night when your body is your car, right? And you're putting the car in the garage, so you don't need to fuel it up. Small things like that. Alcohol was a massive one, so that was the number one non-negotiable, was zero alcohol until this has been achieved. That was, yes, from a calorie point of view, but it was also from several other points of view. So alcohol has a huge negative effect on sleep. Now, sleep then, or a lack of REM sleep, will actually spike a hormone in your body called ghrelin and reduce leptin. So leptin is a suppressant for your hunger, and ghrelin is grazer. Yeah, that's like, you want to graze all the time. You crave that starchy food, etc. But the reason behind it is because your body's not been replenished and re-energized, so it's craving calories to do it. So there was a couple of reasons why alcohol was a huge non-negotiable and had to go. And then obviously we just programmed him in a safe manner. Obviously the weight was really high at the start, so there was no chance I was going to be running him at that point because the risk of injury was too high. We needed to get the weight off, and we just put that process in place over the 80 days that, you know, by the end, I remember he sent me a screenshot of Strava. I think he did a 2K run, his first one, and by the end we were running from the Burj Khalifa to the Burj Al Arab.
It's amazing, honestly. What a fair play to you for what you've done, because with a program that it was a little like a Tyson Fury story, really. The amount of weight he lost. I don't know what 30 kilos is in stones, but it's significant. So just goes to show, and I noticed differences in him around the office. You know, being more approachable, having more energy for other people, and the fact is that he might not grow up an older feeling that being around his kids, which for me is a massive driver. Okay, so tell me about some of the athletes you train in a minute. So what do they do in their daily routine that's different to, let's say, a different level footballer? What really is different and differentiating? So,
yeah, I mean, you can see quite clear differences from Premier League even to Championship. To be honest,
even
really? Interestingly, last night I listened to Kieran Trippier's podcast that's just come out, and he spoke about it, and he said, you know, when he went to Tottenham from Burnley, he thought he was in good shape, and, you know, he'd done all his work in the off season, but he was 10% body fat, and he got in there and he got put in the fat club.
Really? At 10%?
Because he wasn't 8%. So he was in the altitude chamber after training doing spin sessions, you know, and then he observed people like Harry Kane and Hugo Lloris and all these other guys that were in the squad already. And the small things that they did in terms of diets. You know, they've got the chefs, they invest in the chef at home to cook the right food. They've got the recovery products at home, so you're then going back to your environment, they're just set up to perform at all levels. I see it in, you know, Declan is a prime example. Obviously a lot of media hype around him at the moment, but I trained Declan in 2019 before COVID, when he was, I think, 20 years old. And he was just breaking into the England team. The athlete he is now is chalk and cheese to even then.
Really?
So he was a high level player then, and now he's one of the best in the world. You know, the body fat percentage on him, I would speculate being about 6%. Like, you can see the guy's veins in his legs. Like, he's so muscular. Like, it's Yeah, that's the key differences, I would say. But again,
is that set by standards of the environment though? Because again, if you've got two players that are probably doing the same things, but the environment is elevated the standards of what's expected.
Yeah, I would say so. But it goes back again to the psychology, I think, of the identity of him and who does he want to be in the future. You know, does he want to be just a Premier League footballer, or does he want to be a Champions League footballer and potential England captain? You know, that having that future identity is so key, and I think that translates to anyone in any walk of life. You know, and it doesn't have to be from a performance point of view. Guess, you know, it could be someone like Rob, who went through this transformation challenge, and he just wanted to be, like you say, a healthy dad that could move with his kids. So because he's got that, he'll do the habits and the actions that need to take place.
One of the couple of keywords I use when people join this business in real estate is people always are fascinated about what has it took for Darren or Rob or Charlie King or Ryan Hudson, all these top people in the business. What's the difference between them and everyone else? Or what's the difference between being truly successful? Two keywords. And one you mentioned is discipline. And discipline, I think, and consistency is probably one of the hardest things. Getting up and doing the same thing every single day, and that's probably harder than having a really great day and then, you know, a not so great day afterwards. But the other key thing and key word is sacrifice. It's being able to sacrifice parts of your things you like doing in life to really for the betterment of yourself or the betterment of the process. For example, Rob's a sociable guy. He enjoys a drink every now and then. He sacrificed that. He sacrificed parts of his working time to train with you, twice, sometimes three times a day. Yeah. He sacrificed seeing his wife quite a lot on his children and going to bed quite a lot. So that's a huge sacrifice. When I relate it to real estate here, the sacrifice is when you move to a new country, your sacrifice is being away from mum and dad. Your sacrifice is being away from your local football team or your best friends. Your sacrifice is actually on a Friday night when everyone's going out for a drink or a beer at the end of the week. Your sacrifice is now I'm going to go home and I'm either going to have a bit of dinner and get ready for Saturday's work, or I'm going to go to the gym and get ready for the next day. So I actually think sacrifice plays a huge part in high performance, as probably just as much as discipline. I think they kind of come hand in hand, and certainly from a real estate perspective as well. I honestly believe in this job, what you do outside of work can impact massively what you do in work. Not just physical performance, but investing in yourself as well in terms of knowledge and understanding what's happened in the marketplace or in your industry. What you need to do to improve, whether it's sleep, whether it's nutrition. Continue and invest in yourself. So for anyone that's in the real estate sector and you are at a level where you feel like you could do more, there probably is. So there is always an answer. And I think the first thing anyone needs to do, and I don't know how professional handles it, is self-analyse, look at some of the things you're doing. If someone was playing in League One today and they were without a football club, what kind of advice would you give to someone not related to real estate to try and say, right, this is what I need to do to go up a level, find a club or whatever it might be? How would you self-analyse if you don't have that support or that environment?
Yeah, I think you've got to, look at what your routines are, but also look at the people who you want to be. What are they doing? Yeah. I had a really good conversation with a guy who was actually Ronnie O'Sullivan, the psychologist. So you can imagine how complex that was. Oh, yeah. And at the time, obviously, he was in a bad place, but wanted to be world champion. And he said, well, who do you want to be? And he sort of said Steve Davis at the time, yeah? And he said, well, what does Steve Davis do? Does Steve Davis go out drinking, taking cocaine, all these things that he was doing? Or does Steve Davis knuckle down, do a bit of exercise in the morning, and then get on the snooker table and practice and practice and practice? And that's what makes him world champion. And obviously, look what happened with Ronnie throughout his career. Yeah. Fantastic career. So that would be the advice, really, is that, everyone somewhere has somebody they want to emulate, but, the proof is in the pudding. They've got the blueprint, right? Yeah. If you follow that blueprint, you won't be far off from achieving where you want to be.
Do you believe in levels in terms of someone's only capable of a certain maximum. For example, that League One footballer we're talking about, 2 levels below the Premier League. Is there a level that they can achieve, or is there things people can do to control how much they can get out of themselves?
I don't believe in levels as such. I think there's an ability, correct. But then how many people who have fantastic ability don't achieve that ability?
Yeah.
So there's no reason that anybody can't get to the top of their kind of industry. And I think what you just mentioned there about discipline and sacrifice and making the right decisions and not getting carried away at both ends of the spectrum is the key to that. Yeah.
Last question I've got here was, do instant gratification, rewards and end goals, without me being derogatory to a certain age group, I feel like a lot of youngsters these days want things quickly.
Yeah.
They want things instant. I think we're in that environment where you can get things delivered within an hour or 2 hours, or they want to be overnight millionaires through crypto, forex, whatever it might be. How do you balance the people that want instant results, instant gratification, to actually having a longer term view and saying, right, here's what the result looks like, and having measurable milestones? You can relate it back to Rob really as well, to ensure someone's working towards what that holy grail is.
I mean, ultimately then, as leaders, that comes from us to kind of educate on that process. But the reason that the kind of millennials want that right now is because they've only ever known dopamine secretion. So when you look at Instagram, etc., when you get a like on Instagram, dopamine in the brain.
Okay.
That's how crazy this stuff is. And generally speaking, the world is now addicted to dopamine.
Okay.
But who knows that?
Yeah.
You know, these people. I've got a sister that's 14, right, and she loves taking in selfies, this, that, and that. And I'm like, what are you doing? You know. But
is that dangerous?
I think it's one of the biggest dangers to the planet. Yeah.
Really? Because my brother's over at the moment, he's 23, and I'm 15 years older than him, and the way he or his generation view life, or whether you talk about Instagram likes, so like that stuff doesn't even like register with me.
Yeah. So the rate of depression in 25 to 40-year-olds right now is at the highest it's ever been in history.
Wow.
And why is that? Social media.
Wow.
Yeah.
So when we talk about Rob, how did you keep him motivated? Because he's a really good example, and I'll give you some examples as well. But you know, in this job and in sports, like Declan Rice, at 20, I'm sure he knew he was going to be a great player or a good player. But you know, what kind of things do you think his managers or people around him have kind of said to him, Declan, do this, this, and this, and these are your checking points to be England captain? That makes sense.
I think. Good question. I mean, with Rob, it was the weekly measure. Yeah. I would say so. There was a couple of times when he wanted to jump on the scales midweek, right? And he did do, and the weight wasn't quite where he wanted to be, and then the motivation dropped a little bit. And I actually, after about 3 weeks of him doing that, I said, we're stopping doing that. We're not doing it. That is not part of the process. Yeah. I'm very process driven rather than,
me too,
you know, results. And there's another psychological theory of redhead, bluehead, actually. So redhead is always focused on results, and with that comes a lot of anxiety, stress. Bluehead is very process driven. This is what the All Blacks use, actually. And the All Blacks are the most successful sports team of all time. 110 years, they've got an 87% win ratio in 110 years, and they're process driven. So again, that's what we just kept coming back to with Rob, was trust the process. So
the redhead is basically they just look at the results.
Yeah.
Bluehead is the steps. Focus on the steps, and the result takes care of itself.
Yeah. So look at Pep Guardiola. I think he's going to change the way he plays football for anybody.
No.
Even if it's Champions League final, 1-0 down, 5 minutes to go, they are going to play football in the way that they've been trained to play football. Because why wouldn't they? Because that's the process they work on every single minute of every single day.
Really interesting you say that, because one of my mantras in this business, and I don't mean to steal any thunder here, was when we talk about what it takes to be successful, I never ask the agents to look at the sales board or what anyone else is earning, because that can have no impact on them whatsoever. Yep. You know, if X person's doing this, how is that going to impact you? But if you do this, and this, and have kind of your horse blinkers on, the result will be okay, it'll take care of itself.
Correct. So going back to that, if you make 50 calls a day, more than likely the numbers game, one of them is going to lead to something. But if you're just focusing on, I just want to make the big sale, the big sale, the big sale, the big sale, then try to pick a needle out of the haystack, right? So same thing when it comes down to what we do, just turn up every day. We'll sort the program. You don't need to think about anything. Turn up, be there for an hour, be present, give us your 100% of what you've got at that moment. And then when you go away, obviously there's a set of blueprints with Robert, with no drinking, good night's sleep, etc., etc., etc. And then the results spoke for themselves.
Mate, I have really, really, really enjoyed today. Before we wrap things up, if I was to ask you, not just people that are in real estate or in business, but if people want to have a healthier or better feeling life or create them good, what some of the things would you say to people just to start doing to try and get on that journey and to improve productivity, health, sleep, whatever it might be? Some of the things you'd start with.
Sleep is one. I think got to prioritize your sleep.
So what's the key at number of hours of sleep? I know about number of hours, but it's how much time you spend sleeping.
Yeah, I mean 8 hours is the 7.5 to 8 hours is the metric. But the key to that is the deep sleep. If you want to track it, I'm not wearing mine right now, but the Whoop is what I've used in the past really, really efficiently. And the key thing about the Whoop is that you've got a daily diary as well, so you can actually eventually start picking up on the little habits that you do that affect a good night or a bad night's sleep. So I actually found that when I read in bed as opposed to watch Netflix, my REM sleep increases by 20%.
Really?
Which has a massive effect on my recovery. I'm trying to run a business, like I can't be at 50% cognitively every single day. If there's a reduction in REM sleep, you get a 40% reduction in reaction time, 30% reduction in your cognitive function. So obviously we're all ambitious people and we want to excel. So it's got to start with the sleep, really. Forget the exercise.
I typically wear one. I've got it on charge actually. But when you don't have enough sleep, or let's say you may have a drink or whatever, the difference. So this Whoop band shows you the next day of your recovery and really how much strain you can put on your body in terms of activity. And when you don't sleep or you do something that your body shouldn't be doing, the damage, when you see it visually, you think, oh my God, I'm not ready to do something the next day, or my body, I shouldn't be doing that. So sleep's massive.
It's frightening, yeah.
It's about to sleep a lot more since I've been doing it. What about anything else? What routines or habits? Let's say you're not an exerciser, what else?
Well, I would say get out and get some daily sunlight first and foremost. Get some vitamin D. It's great for you. You get the hormonal influx that we spoke about in terms of serotonin and cortisol. That's going to help regulate your dopamine. Ultimately, if you're not getting them, you're probably going to go and crave something that is very dopamine driven. So just getting out. We're fortunate that we're in a place where we can do that, aren't we? Also small things, get down the beach. Sounds mad, but we are humans that are used to being next to the sea and stuff like that. So even just the sound of the waves will start to impact these hormonal responses.
I agree on that.
Yeah, it's frightening, really, how simple it can be.
Well, some of the things I do just to share and wrap things up is, so every single week on a Sunday night, so I go to certain exercise classes. I will plan every single day throughout the course of the week. This day. In my diary, I booked it in. I know exactly when I'm doing it. If I'm having a walk or a run that day, it's in my diary. So I'm holding myself accountable to what my plan is during the week, and everything else fits around that. That's where I start my week. I've got my meetings anyway. So having a bit of a plan and not being ad hoc and waking up and saying, I'll do a run today, I'll do an exercise, say, plan ahead, do that on your Sunday evening, so you're working towards that. Making sure you have enough sleep. Water's massive.
Yeah, hydration.
Hydration's absolutely huge. And just be careful, be mindful. I've been using MyFitnessPal. The tracking macros, and my God, again, that also makes you think so much about what you put in your body, and again, the impact that has on your sleep and the next day is quite frank. And I think if you start with these habits, whether it's you do a bit of exercise or you get down to the beach or you plan your meals, I honestly believe it can affect not just your work performance, your family, you know, the time you spend with your kids, or the energy levels you got your kids or your wife or your partner, whatever it might be. There are so many benefits as opposed to that one night high of the booze or the whatever it might be. It's very short lived.
Yeah, I agree.
Mate, it's been an absolute pleasure.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you very much.
Perfect.
And see you soon. Thank you, guys.
Cheers.